This episode contains discussion of murder by gunshot, drug use, talk of verbal and physical abuse, paranormal activity, real scary things. Listener discretion is advised.
You've no doubt heard of the Amityville Horror before. From a best-selling book to a multi-million-dollar film franchise, the story has captured the world's attention from the instant it was reported. The quiet Long Island town was rocked when the DeFeo family was brutally murdered while they slept. The Lutz family purchased and moved into their home following their deaths, but only stayed for 28 days before fleeing in terror in the night. The sensationalism of their claims led to a media frenzy, but the question remains. Did they experience a genuine supernatural phenomenon, or was it just an elaborate hoax?
Your face, the look on your face was like...
Defeat is what it was.
Okay, guys, words are hard. It's after lunch. Pray for us, okay? And we'll pray for you who has to listen to it. All we can do is pray for her, you know? All right, so this one, I'm scared. I'm just gonna say it. I'm scared.
Yes, she is. She's very, very scared.
I legit texted Tori this morning and I was like, I don't know if I can watch the stuff we need to watch. Like, I don't know if I can do it. You might have to just take the reins. You know this stuff. Paranormal stuff does not go with me. It's people waking up at a certain time every night.
There was a while where I was waking up at around 3 o'clock every night, and you said that it was my witching hour, and you were like, that's paranormal activity.
And so get away from me. Like, don't bring that here. Don't you bring it here.
Well, and they say, of course, things that come in threes, it mocks the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, the Trinity, the Holy Trinity.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I know.
Scary shit.
Just saying.
We do want to give a hey girl thanks to Jennifer Lynn West and Charity for requesting the case.
Thanks. So, an extra special thanks to you guys for scaring Torella out of her little boots.
This has been rough for me. I tried to research this in the daytime. Well, always in the daytime, but even outside, because daytime in my house, too scary. So then I was like, I will go outside. Too scary. Okay.
I told Miss KB about this whole thing, and I was like, she can't even watch the intro to Evil Lives Here in the daytime in her own house.
Have you heard it?
Yes!
No, it's too
You're
scary.
So silly. But we also have to thank Mark for writing this up.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
And obviously there's like a bajillion things that you could watch. All of them scary. So, just in case you were wondering.
Or if you wear big boy breeches, then, or big girl, whatever you wear, if you're not a baby, a little tiny baby, then some of them are actually really interesting.
Okay, we can agree to disagree.
Hey, the Amityville Horror movie with Ryan Reynolds, you liked that one because of a shirtless Ryan Reynolds.
I did. That's the only thing that got me through it, if we're being honest. Yeah. Okay, so shall we head to Amityville, New York?
Yes, we shall.
Okay, and you guys know, okay, so Mark is one of our amazing writers, and he always gives us really interesting background of the cities and stuff. So we're about to get some goods there. This part, not scary. So Amityville is a suburb of the town of Babylon in Suffolk County, New York. It sits along the south shore of Long Island.
Yes.
Okay. The U.S. Census Bureau states that the village has a total area of 2.5 square miles, and of that, 0.4 of that is water. So some quick maths tells us that the small village is actually around 15% water. Not my maths. That's Mark's maths. I don't do maths. Yeah. And we trust him implicitly. Okay.
Yes.
The population as of the 2010 census, which is the newest one available with Amityville, is around 9,500 people, meaning that there are around 4,500 people per square mile. The small area is served by 3 elementary schools alongside 1 middle and high school. That is no bigger than your mama's Jack Russell.
Oh, it's very, very small. I bet they could have it carpeted.
Absolutely. That's like, if they were Southern, excuse me, they'd be like, how's your mom and them?
It could beat Rhode Island up in a war.
Absolutely.
That's how small it is.
So the land around Amityville was a big draw for settlers back in the olden days. And no, kids, not the 1900s, not the late 1900s. We're talking about like the 1800s, okay? But Amityville had marshy wetlands, and in those wetlands, salt hay grew plentifully, which the people harvested to use to feed their livestock. This led to the area being broken up into several small farms, and the salt hay would be grown as a crop and then sold to other settlers nearby. So Amityville itself sort of started as like a commercial center. There were mills there in the late 1800s to early 1900s. Those mostly expanded into other ventures. Some transformed into different retail locations for various provisions, while others became like family restaurants, bakeries, stuff like that. These changes sparked interest from neighboring communities, and really quickly, Amityville was like the place you went to do your shopping.
Good for you, Amityville. Yeah.
Fancy schmancy. As time went on, Amityville became one of those small beach towns in the Northeast where people would go to vacation. And it was a place where the rich and famous started to purchase and build their summer homes.
Where does everybody summer?
Yeah. And it feels like, at one point, Al Capone stayed in Amityville. And that guy's all over the place. But if he chose Amityville, then, that's saying something, right?
Yeah, it is.
But from all accounts, the craziest thing that happened while Capone was there was the occasional, like, neighborhood baseball game that was played in his front yard. So not a whole lot of shenanigans from Capone, I would say. Probably the most recognizable name to come out of Amityville is Alec Baldwin. Did not know this until this case. While Baldwin was born there, he spent most of his time in Massapequa. That's where he was raised and lived. While there have been a handful of professional athletes and musicians to come out of Amityville, De La Soul is likely the only one you would have heard of. And didn't ring a bell for me, at first. The hip-hop trio formed in Amityville in the late 80s and for 3 decades has continued to put out music or contribute to other artists. Their debut album, 3 Feet High and Rising, has been referred to as a hip-hop masterpiece. Good for you. For several years, the group's music wasn't available on any streaming platforms because the members refused to sign off after learning they would only get 10% of the earnings from streams, while the record label got the rest.
That's some bullshit.
That's some bullshit. In March of 2023, the record label by that point had been bought out, and so they eventually gained the rights back to all their music. Again, good for you. However, this victory that they fought hard for was overshadowed by the passing of one of the members, David Jolicoeur, aka Trugoy the Dove, just 2 weeks before this due to heart failure. Yikes. But, okay, let's be honest. When you hear Amityville, you're not thinking of Al Capone. You're not thinking of Alec Baldwin. And you're not thinking of De La Soul. You're thinking of the Amityville Horror. Okay? This is terrifying stuff. But let's talk about the Amityville house before we get into the rest.
Yes. The Amityville house sits on 112 Ocean Avenue and is probably the most famous house in Long Island. And Mark did look it up. It's not where the Yellow Card song is talking about, there's a place called Ocean Avenue, or on Ocean Avenue, where I used to sit and talk with you. That Ocean Avenue is actually in Jacksonville, where a band was formed. I actually used to ride my bike down Ocean Avenue lots and lots of times. Mm-hmm. But the house is a 3-story Dutch colonial, which was built for a couple, the Moynahans, who purchased the land from the Ireland family, one of the founding families of Amityville. The Irelands were one of those families we mentioned who had initially had a mill in the area, but then they started a tavern and bakery, and they had tons of land in the area. After buying the land, the Moynahans had to remove a small cabin, or you might call it a shack, that was on the property before they hired a local builder who built the 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom home. The property remained in the Moynihan family until 1960 when their daughter sold it to John and Mary Riley. The Rileys lived in the house for 5 years before it was sold to Ron and Louise DeFeo in June of 1965.
And also, this part might sound just like slightly like Genesis in the Bible, where it's like, and this person gave birth, or like, the this and then this and then this and then that, right, or whatever. But there's a reason. It's very central to the story. Like, just think about how long these people lived there.
Yeah, this house is not like, it just didn't come up from out of the earth and become or already as a haunted house.
Right. And the DeFeos were not the first family to live there.
No. And they weren't the last family to live there. Even after the Lutzes, which we're getting ahead of ourselves here. So let's power on. So as we will discuss, the DeFeo family met a tragic end 9 years later, and about a year after that, the Ocean Avenue home was purchased by George and Kathy Lutz, and we will go into their story in part 2, so get ready and, don't sleep on this one. But less than a month after they moved in, the Lutz family abruptly left the house in the middle of the night. In 1977, Jim and Barbara Cromartie purchased the home for $55,000, but they were unaware that a book was about to be published detailing what the Lutz family claimed happened to them while they lived there. And then the book was released, and suddenly their house is like the place to be for a media circus, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They were bombarded by unwanted visitors day and night. They tried to change the address of the house, but that didn't do anything to help this. The Cromarties did an interview with Newsday where they talked about the experience, and they said that they were barely sleeping because people came at all hours. On one occasion, a man stood in their yard at 3 a.m. and played a bugle as loud as he could.
Why?
Can't tell you.
He's just like, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Like, why? What does
we get enough of that from the birds outside. We don't need a bugler.
I know. Like, is a bugle a well-known spirit-raising instrument? I don't
know. And also, who the hell knows how to play a bugle? Who has a bugle? Unless it's those things that you put on your fingers when you get them at a gas station on a road trip.
Well, yeah, that's the only... so he's like...
Playing the bugles. Yeah, I don't know. But on a different night, someone left human excrement. We call that shit on their porch. They couldn't put out holiday decorations because they all got stolen. Their 14-year-old daughter was harassed in school by classmates asking if she saw any ghosts since they moved in. Just sounds terrible. And I think that it would be kind of cool to live in that house. Like, it's just a beautiful home. 3 stories? I think it's beautiful.
Yes.
I would live there.
It is beautiful. Obviously I just can't. But yes, it's beautiful.
But I wouldn't want all of this shit, like that's too much. But
No.
By December of 1978, the Cromarties decided to sell their home and listed it for sale for $100,000. Then in July of 1979, the Amityville Horror was released in theaters. This brought a whole new wave of people to Amityville, and problems arose that affected the entire community. Ocean Avenue would become littered with empty beer bottles, popcorn boxes, and other trash just left all over by people coming to see the house. Why is that, like, where people go first with that? I just don't get it. It's like looting and leaving shit all over, just littering.
Yeah, they're like, hey, let's go look at the house, and while we're there, throw all of our trash at it. Like,
I don't get it.
People are literally the worst.
I know, and I say looting because they were stealing their holiday decorations.
Yeah, like, you can't even put out your holiday decorations. I mean, sometimes some holiday decorations are, like, sentimental. Like, what if it's, like, your grandma's wreath or whatever?
I know.
Terrible.
I know. So, as the crowds grew, more police officers were required to be in the area, which resulted in more officers being hired and overtime being paid, and this was super expensive for this teeny tiny little town. Town officials tried to think of ways to monetize the crowds, maybe like running a bus for a tour of the town and the house, or charging admission for people to see the house, but these plans were never ultimately approved out of respect for the DeFeo family. After a while of unsuccessful attempts at selling the property, the Cromarties moved back in. They actually became proactive and tried to change the home's reputation, so they accepted speaking engagements around the New York area and talked about the home's real history, not just what people saw in the movie. When the book was originally released, it had a subtitle of A True Story on the cover. In 1982, the Cromarties reached a settlement with the publisher to have that removed from any future printings. And over time, the craziness died down, but it would pick back up when the movie was played on TV or if anything brought it to the news. In 1987, they finally sold the house to Peter and Jean O'Neill for $325,000. The O'Neills made changes. Most notably, they swapped out what people called the eye windows for square ones. This makes me sad, and I'll tell you why. Because that is the identifier to me for this house, and I think that they really, really, did they not bring something to the look of the house? It really complemented the
Yeah.
Dutch colonial style.
Yes, it did. Now, I will say that is the part that scares me the most about the outside of it. Those windows.
They're
But
so distinct.
it's like, yes, they're so distinct. Like it's part of the look of the house. Like,
absolutely.
yeah.
That's like taking a van and changing the windows out for bubble windows. No, I can't remember. Who did that? Somebody did that to try to change the look of their van to make it not look like
You talk about Carl in a grape van? Would it have been Workaholics? I feel like he tried to do some stuff. No?
Oh, probably. But it was a case that we covered. I don't think it was...
Oh, a real thing.
Like a real one, yes.
Oh, I don't know. Do you remember, though, we used to go out to a certain friend's house to party way out in the middle of nowhere.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And when you would turn down their road, there was a house that looked just like the Amityville house.
Yes.
And that scared the shit out of me because I'd be driving there and I'm like ready to go hang out with my friends and I'm like and like if I was leaving and going home and it was late at night I'd be like, oh my God, like don't look at it. It just freaked me out.
They're so funny. You're so funny.
I just couldn't even like look at that house.
I like pray for a time that I get as scared as you get on a daily basis. I'm like, please scare me. Come on. Like watching movies, like please scare me. And it doesn't happen. The last time I got actually like jumped out of my skin scared was when I was hammocking and I was watching a horror movie and on my iPad and I didn't know that my dad let Apple, my dog, out and she licked my ear and I about came my soul left my body in that moment. But anyway, so the O'Neills, right? They also not only changed out the eye windows on the third floor, but they also filled in the in-ground pool that was on the property. And after living there for 10 years, they sold the house for $310,000 to Brian Wilson. Now, Brian Wilson lived there for 13 years, and he made several improvements to the home and property, including adding a second sunroom to the backside. And he sold the house for $950,000. Holy schmolies.
Made himself a little profit.
Yes, he sure did. The owners after him lived there for 6 years before selling the house in March of 2017 for $605,000. So they lost some money on that. But they originally asked for $850,000. And the reason why we go into all of this is to say that the house, as far as we can tell, for the most part, is not haunted, if you believe the Lutzes.
Right. Yeah. It's either not haunted or these are all families who don't give a fuck about ghosts.
Right. But
And
nothing has been reported of the like. Yeah.
No.
So.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the DeFeo family. Ronald Joseph, who went by Big Ronnie DeFeo, was born in November of 1930. He was a slender, handsome young man, and people said that he had a powerful gaze and suave looks.
What does a powerful gaze mean?
That kind of makes me feel uncomfortable. So I don't know. I can't tell if it's a good thing or not.
Hey, kid, quit gazing at me. Like, stop it.
Like, that's too powerful.
Yeah.
Gaze elsewhere. Yeah. It was his good looks, though, that drew the attention of Louise Marie Brigante. At the time, Ronald Sr. worked at a car dealership, and it's believed that Louise was pursuing a career in modeling. After a brief courtship, they married. Louise's family, though, not fond of Ronald Sr.
They didn't like that gaze.
Too powerful. See? In fact, when they got married, Louise's family just cut ties with her completely. They would remain estranged until September of 1951 when the couple welcomed their first child, Ronald, who went by Butch DeFeo Jr. Over the next few years, they would have 4 additional children, so that's Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John. The DeFeos lived in an apartment in Brooklyn for several years, pretty much until John was born, and they had outgrown this apartment before John was born, but...
Well, yeah, that's a family of 7.
Yeah, once he was born, they were like, okay, we gotta do something about this. So they thought about staying in the city, and then they decided, how about we look at some of the smaller towns along the coast? And by this time, Louise's parents still weren't like super fans of Ronnie Sr., but they were tolerating him at this point. He was actually the manager of a car dealership that his father-in-law owned. And business was going well to the point where money wasn't a super big concern to them. So when they found the house in Amityville, right on the water with a boathouse, plenty of rooms for everyone, it felt like it was meant to be. But while money wasn't really a huge problem for them, a purchase like this was still a bit much for the family to swing. And it's been said from different sources that Louise's father actually purchased the home for them. This was not an unfamiliar pattern for the family. When something came up and they needed money, they would turn to Louise's father. And at one point, Ronnie Sr. wanted some portraits of the family painted, of all the family members, which, like, do people even do that anymore?
I know someone who at like a silent auction or something, they won a portrait that, like, a painted portrait, and they made their daughter sit for it, and she was like, it was the most awkward, like, 9 hours of my life. Like, she said it was, and everybody hates the picture, so.
Oh no.
They always say it's creepy. I don't know.
Yeah, they always end up, I don't know. It's like, because the portraits, not everybody, I mean, you couldn't smile for that long, right? Like, that would be ridiculous. But, like, it's always just like,
yeah,
I don't know. Just everybody looks like, I don't know. But they wanted portraits done, or he did. And apparently his father-in-law ended up paying for them, which was supposedly around $50,000. Darn.
Like, look, Ronnie Sr., I do know that, or Big Ron, whatever you want to be called, I know you want the portraits, and I love that for you, but you're not going to get the portraits because that's, I mean, $50,000 in the 70s.
Yeah, if it was like $50,000 towards a home for the family and you had that kind of money, I don't know. Yeah, for a portrait, I don't know. I don't want portraits, so I don't know.
Want, not a need.
That's what
some
it feels
would
like
say.
to me. Yeah. So when the family moved into the house in Amityville, Ronnie Sr. Oh my God. Ronnie Sr.
I knew it was going to come for you.
Ronnie Sr. hung a sign out front that said High Hopes, which was the nickname they used for their new home. That's kind of heartbreaking.
It is very heartbreaking, but we really need to figure out what our homes would be called. Something like Loose Chippings comes to mind.
Loose Chippings. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, maybe I'll just name my house Big Stairs.
Big Stairs.
Yeah. Welcome to Big Stairs.
There are no stairs, so that's the tricky part.
That's the tricky part.
That's how they get you. Yeah. Yeah, that would be fun. What would you guys name your house?
Yeah.
Comment below. The 4 people that watch this.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so they called it High Hopes. Yikes. One thing we haven't touched on, though, is, okay, Louise's father and Big Ronnie Sr., they had some ties to, like, organized crime and the mafia. So Ronnie Sr. had an uncle who was a known accomplice and associate of the Gambino family, right? No, of the Genovese crime family. And Louise's father was a known associate of Carlo Gambino. So that's the head of the Gambino crime family. So both of those are pretty big.
Deal.
Pretty big, yeah. This is also an area in New York, New Jersey, and a time, the 60s and 70s, when having, like, mob connections was basically a rite of passage for teenage and young adult boys / men. People who grew up in that area and time will say that kind of everyone they knew had some sort of connection to the mob, but it was always like my cousin's cousin or my uncle's friend's butcher. Like, it's, somewhere down the line, there's a connection. There wasn't necessarily proof of this all the time, but it was just something that they would say.
Yeah.
So we have this nice family who moved from the city who might possibly have connections to organized crime in some fashion, whether it be real or not, or strong or not, whatever.
Aunt's cat's niece.
Exactly. They were known and well-liked in the town, but there was something that kept them all on edge. So Ronald Sr. had a bad temper. Really bad temper. And it probably won't come as a surprise to anyone listening, but most of the time when he flew off the handle, his targets would be either Louise or the children. And Ronald Jr., being the oldest son, usually caught the brunt of it. He had higher expectations placed on him from the start. When he was younger, Butch was not the most popular kid in school or in their neighborhood. He was sullen and withdrawn. He was also overweight at the time, something that put a target on his back among his classmate and peers. He often got beat up, much to Ronald Sr.'s dismay. He always told Butch that he needed to fight back and stick up for himself, but, he's telling him, don't let anybody take advantage of you. Don't let anybody bully you at school. If somebody says something, you fight back, whatever. But if he tried to stand up for himself or fight back at home, Ronald Sr. would kind of like unleash the fury on him. He did not tolerate any type of back talk, any disrespect.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, but he was very clear that needed to happen at school with other people, Right. So, as for a child, that's really obviously confusing. Yeah. As time passed, Butch grew more into himself. He became bigger, and much of that childhood weight, he was like kind of dropping that, but he was putting on muscle as well. The childhood shouting matches with his father would quickly give way to physical altercations now that he's bigger and stronger. Some described it like a tinderbox. It would barely take anything for this father and son to be going at each other. But even Ronald Sr., and look, he had some issues. Glass houses and whatnot. He could tell that Butch had more going on than just like that typical teenage, like angsty backtalk stuff. There's something else going on with this kid, right? Mm-hmm. He saw that like he knew that he could be driven to anger pretty easily, but Butch, really, it did not take anything at all. You could look at him the wrong way, even if he perceived it to be the wrong way, right?
It reminds me a lot of Kuklinski.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because he said sometimes, yes, all he needed was just somebody to look at him the wrong way, and he would, like that.
Yeah, it's like you're hoping for it because you want to be able to unleash that. Yeah.
You're looking for it, yeah.
Yeah. So he and Louise actually talked with a psychiatrist, and they made Butch go and have visits with this person. These meetings were short-lived, though, because Butch never took them seriously and took what he described was a passive-aggressive approach with his therapist. He rejected any notion from anyone that he needed help. He refused any help when it was offered. Ronald Sr. and Louise were just not equipped to handle Butch or his aggression, so they fell into a habit of just giving Butch whatever he asked for. They just didn't want to deal with it.
I can't blame him, honestly. Like, I don't know what I would do if I was in the same situation, but I do, from an outside perspective, I can see that just giving him whatever he wanted and letting him run the show was probably not the move.
Yeah.
Saying. I'm just saying.
Because
I don't know if I would have done anything different. But
yeah, he took that and he ran with it. When he was 14, they gave him a $14,000 speedboat that he could use to cruise up and down the Amityville River, which ran right behind their house. And when he asked for money, they would give it to him. They really didn't ask a lot of questions. When he didn't feel like asking for money, Butch just took what he needed or what he wanted. And that's a time when everything's cash, right?
Yeah.
Like,
pretty much.
Yeah, so you're trying, yeah, I guess. So like you're trying to go to the gas station or something and you open your purse and you're like, fuck, Butch took all the money. Like, I'm sure that happened at least a time or two.
Oh, like, I'm sure. Yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, like it just, I don't know. Seems likely. When Butch was 17, he was forced to leave the private school that he attended. By this time, he was already using hardcore drugs, including LSD, heroin, and speed.
I think that's bad.
Lots of drugs. He was involving himself in petty crimes as well, mostly stealing things. His violent outbursts started to occur more frequently outside the home, too. One story people tell is that he and some of his buddies were out hunting when Butch picked up his rifle and pointed it at one of his friends that he'd known for years. And he just held it there, pointed at this person who's supposed to be his friend. And this kid's face is like pale. And the friend ran away. And later that day when the group caught back up with him, Butch was just like, where'd you go? Why'd you leave so soon?
Let me think. Because you almost friggin' killed me.
You know, that kind of reminds me of, what's the guy's name? He's a runner, but he had the leg things and he killed his girlfriend.
Yes.
Shoot, I can't remember his name, but that kind of reminds me of him because he would do that with guns all the time. All of his friends would be riding in a car and he would just be in a shithead, point it up in the sunroof and, or he'd do that in restaurants and shit. Like,
right.
Just whatever he wanted, just thought it was fun. He'd point it at his friends. He'd do whatever, right? Like Pistorius, Oscar Pistorius. Is that his name?
Yes.
I'm like, I know that name. Yeah. We covered that on our Patreon a long time ago. So
we sure did.
When Butch turned 18, he was given a job at his grandfather's Buick dealership. And later, Butch described this as his gravy job. Basically, nothing was expected of him. He didn't even have to show up for work, and he would still get cash at the end of every week. Honestly, his grandfather was probably like, I'll pay you to not show up.
Right, yeah.
Like, get out of here. He used this money on things for his car, which his parents paid for, or for drugs and booze. The violence at home was still always going on. One night, Ronald Sr. and Louise were fighting, and it was really bad. Butch went up to his room and grabbed his gun and loaded it while racing down to where his parents were fighting. And without hesitation, he burst in and reportedly said, "Leave that woman alone. I'm going to kill you, you fat fuck." I'm assuming it's fuck. It's expletived out. This is it, he said. And he then raised the gun to his father's head and pulled the trigger. He wasn't f***ing around. The gun malfunctioned and did not go off. And then his parents are standing there just completely frozen. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to point a gun at somebody and say that you're going to kill them. This is your dad. He pulled the trigger.
Yeah, he did.
And they were both just like, and then he lowered the gun and just kind of walked out of the room.
Yeah, what do you do after that happens?
Well, I'll tell you what Ronald Sr. did. He started going to church and he started apparently straightening some of that shit up.
Well, yeah, a near-death experience like that will really jar you, I would think.
Yeah, but it's like,
how do you just go back to being like a fine family after something like that happens,
Yeah, do you still, as Louise, the mom, are you still cooking dinner and asking Butch, do you want mashed potatoes with that? Like, that's, he didn't point the gun at her, but it's still, she would have, obviously what happened to them was absolutely horrific. In that moment, she would have watched him shoot her husband,
yeah,
directly in front of her if the gun had not malfunctioned. Like, yeah, how do you go back?
I don't know.
Things at the dealership took a turn in the weeks before the family's slaying. In the past, Butch had been given the responsibility of taking cash and checks to the bank and depositing them. It wasn't something he did regularly, but he would do it on occasion. He started to get upset with the money he was being paid for, quote, working at the dealership. Because he wasn't making enough money, you guys. He wasn't making enough money to sit at home.
Right.
The entitlement. And like you said, you got a kid who is that difficult, and eventually they said, just give him what he wants. And to me, that really says something that Ronald Sr. even felt that way, because that was a man who wasn't afraid to get violent.
Well, right. And so obviously, Butch must have been real goddamn ridiculous. Like,
exactly.
Really difficult.
Yeah, it's got to be really bad. But then you foster this sense of entitlement because he gets whatever he wants whenever he wants it.
Well, yeah. And
I'm not blaming them. It's just, that's a byproduct of what, kind of came out of it. Although he seemed that way to begin with.
You have a 14-year-old who gets everything that they want. You have a 17-year-old that gets everything that you want. What does the adult version of that look like when you get everything that you want?
Right. Yeah. So remember, sometimes he would take the deposits to the bank. Well, he wasn't getting paid enough, according to him. And so he devised a plan. And he thought, I know what I'll do. I will take the deposits, which at this time was $1,800 in cash and around $20,000 in checks, because it's a car dealership. Cars are
big purchases,
high dollar tickets. Yeah. So he had arranged for an accomplice to rob him of his deposit, or this deposit, on his way to the bank. So on the day of the, quote, robbery, Butch and an accomplice from the dealership left, and they didn't come back for 2 hours. And when they got back, they were like, oh my God, you guys will never ever believe this, but we were robbed at gunpoint. I can't believe this happened. And Ronald Sr. was at the dealership when Butch got back and exploded on the staff member who sent Butch with the money in the first place. So again, he's still explosive. Now, the police were called, but when they got there, Butch would not cooperate with them at all. He wouldn't give them any type of a description of the robber. He was very tense. He was super combative. After a little while, they suspected he was lying. And when Butch kind of figured out that they weren't believing him, he got pretty pissed and started to act absolutely enraged. He was banging his fist on the hood of one of the cars on the lot. After a little while, the police backed off of their questioning. A few days later, they asked Butch, hey, come in, look at some mug shots of people. Tell me if you see the person that robbed you. And he initially agreed, but then he later canceled. And this enraged Ronald Sr., who had already come to his own conclusion regarding his son and the quote, robbery. So when Ronald Sr. learned that Butch had canceled, he confronted him at the dealership. This argument did not come to blows, but Ronald Sr. said to his son, quote, you've got the devil on your back. And Butch replied to that, you fat prick, I'll kill you, before jumping into his car and speeding off. Interestingly enough, yeah, that happened like just before.
Days before.
His father ends up dead.
Right.
But let's say it was a demonic possession and not somebody who was mad at his parents.
100%. Right. On a mid-November morning in 1974, Butch showed up to work like he would have done any other day. He hung out for a little bit and then he called home several times throughout the morning. Something odd that morning was that his father never showed up for work. And when Ronald Sr. never showed up, Butch began to act as if he were bored and had nothing to do. And by noon, he was like, all right, I'm going to RU in an OFT. I don't need this job. So he called his girlfriend. He told her that he was leaving work early and that he wanted to stop by and see her. On his way to her house, while driving, he had passed by a friend, Bobby Kelsky, and the two stopped and chatted briefly. Around 1:30 p.m., he got to her house, and while he was there, he just casually dropped into the conversation that he had been trying to call his house and no one answered. But it was weird because all of the cars, family cars, were in the driveway. So he used her phone to call, and again, there was no answer. He and his girlfriend went to Massapequa and did some shopping in the afternoon before going to Bobby's house. And again, he was like, dude, there was no answer at my house, even though it seems like everyone was there. So weird, huh? And then he immediately asked Bobby if he was going out later, and Bobby told him that he was going to lay down for a bit, but then he would be at the local bar Henry's around 6 that evening.
But, okay, if you keep calling and you're not getting an answer, how do you know that all the cars are there? You've driven past, right?
Must have.
So why didn't you just fucking stop?
I know. I have no idea.
But he keeps bringing that up. So weird. They're all there, though. Did you hear me? I called and no answer, but they're all there. Like,
I know. He's like screaming, you know, somebody listen to me. This is so crazy.
mm-hmm.
But he does this often. He trips him. It's like he is the definition of giving yourself enough rope to hang.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
So Butch spent the rest of the afternoon visiting with friends, drinking a little bit, doing a little bit of heroin, you know, the usual. Around 6, he met Bobby at Henry's bar, and they hung out for a bit. And while he was there, Butch kept talking about how weird it was that no one was answering the phone. So he was like, I'll probably have to break into the window to get into the house, which was nearby Henry's bar. With that, Butch left the bar and went home. And within a few minutes, he came back to the bar. He was frazzled and agitated, and he said, quote, Bob, you gotta help me. Someone shot my mother and father. Bobby, Butch, and a few other patrons from the bar all piled into Butch's car and drove to the DeFeo house, which was like a block or two away. Not long after that, a 911 call was placed. And while we don't have the audio from that call, we have a transcript. And one of the men, Joey Yeswit, made the call. So at this point, he's talking to the operator for a little bit. He's given his name, and the operator is asking for a phone number, which Joey didn't know. He was calling from within the DeFeo home, and after telling the operator that everyone was dead, he was transferred to the police. Torella, you be the man and then the police. And I will be the man, you be the operator of police.
Okay. You're going to be the man, right? You're first.
Oh, right. Oh my gosh, I was waiting for you. I'm going to be Joey Yeswit. Torella's going to be the authorities. So, I don't know what happened. Kid come running in the bar. He says everybody in the family was killed and we came down here.
Hold on a second, sir. Okay, now I'm the police officer. Hello. What's your name?
My name is Joey Yeswit.
George Edwards, you say?
Joe Yeswit.
How do you spell it?
What? How many times do I have to tell you? YESWIT.
Where are you at?
I'm on Ocean Avenue.
What number?
I don't have a number here. There's no number on the phone.
What number on the house?
I don't even know that.
Where are you at? Ocean Avenue and what?
In Amityville. Call up the Amityville police and have someone come down here. They know the family.
Amityville.
Yeah, Amityville.
Okay, now tell me what's wrong.
I don't know. Guy come running in the bar and said his mother and father are shot. We ran down to the house and everybody in the house is shot. I don't know how long, so
what's the address of the house?
Hold on. Let me go look up the number. All right, hold on. 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville.
Is that Amityville or North Amityville?
Amityville! Right on south of Merrick Road.
Is it right in the village limits?
Yeah, it's in the village limits.
Okay, what's your phone number?
I don't even have one. There's no number on the phone.
Okay, where are you calling from? Public phone?
No, I'm calling right from the house because I don't see a number on the phone.
You're at the house itself?
Yeah.
How many bodies are there?
I think, I don't know. I think they said 4.
There's 4?
Yeah.
All right, well, you stay there at the house and I'll call the Amityville Village PD and they'll come down.
I would have been so frustrated.
Yeah. George Edwards, fucking sent me. He's like, Joey Yeswit. Okay, George Edwards, thank you. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. I can't believe he wasn't like, excuse me, ma'am. That would have been the icing on the cake for that. Yeah, it's just.
And he was getting so frustrated. He's like, how many times do I have to tell you?
Yes, exactly. So the police arrive, right? And this is so out of the ordinary for this sleepy town by the water. As the first officer arrived on scene, a small group of men were on the front lawn. Butch was among them. He's sobbing uncontrollably. He told the officer that his father and mother were dead. And the officer went into the house and went upstairs where he discovered Ronald Sr. and Louise, but he also found Mark and John DeFeo. He made his way downstairs where Butch was at the kitchen table still sobbing. Butch told him that he also had 2 sisters, and by this time another officer arrived, and the 2 of them found Dawn and Allison's room where they were deceased. Ronald Sr., Louise, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John were all dead. They had all been shot with a 35 caliber lever action Marlin 336C rifle. That is a mouthful and a half.
That is a mouthful.
Butch's siblings had all been killed by a single gunshot while his parents were shot twice. All of the victims were found lying face down in their beds, and evidence found later suggested that Louise and Allison were awake at the times of their death. Oh, gosh. By 7 p.m., the neighborhood was flooded with the police and onlookers. Butch was questioned about what could have happened, and he told the lead detective that he thought it might have been Louis Fellini, a mafia hitman that Butch claimed held a grudge against his family. So Butch was taken to the police station for his own protection. Butch gave the police a signed written statement, and he claimed that he was on his way home the previous morning. The previous morning. He was watching a movie called Castle Keep on TV until around 2 a.m. He claimed that around 4 a.m. he had gotten up because he couldn't sleep. He walked past the bathroom in the home when he heard the toilet flush. And since he couldn't sleep, he was like, all right, I'm just going to go into work early. Because that's the kind of guy Butch is. Always doing the job and getting there early.
That's like, Butch, dude. Because they're going to ask questions, man. And if they ask anybody at the dealership, they're going to be like, that motherfucker does not come in early for work.
No.
Okay? He ain't never done that before. Honestly, it was out of character that he did do it.
Right, exactly. So then he detailed how he spent the rest of the day. He left work early, hanging out, shopping with his girlfriend, trying to call home several times throughout the day. He went to the bar. Then he went home and discovered the bodies. Butch was questioned about why the mafia hitman would want to kill him, and he told detectives that Fellini had lived with the family for a little while, and when he did, he helped Butch and his father construct a hidden space in the basement where Butch could store a collection of guns. Why? Butch was known to collect firearms and make money from selling them at times, and Butch claimed that the bad blood formed when Fellini criticized some work that he had done at the Buick dealership. During this interview, Butch confessed to being a, quote, casual user of heroin, but he also confessed to insurance fraud with his father. At one point in the past, Butch had damaged the motor on a boat that his family owned, and instead of paying for a new one, his father was like, let's just burn it, set the boat on fire, so they can just claim the insurance money. And everyone was like, Butch is cooperating here. Like, why would he tell us about all of these other crimes if he didn't have to?
Yeah.
Well, as the investigators kept going over the crime scene, the rooms where the murders took place had been gone over with a fine-tooth comb, but Butch's room pretty much had just been given like a brief once-over. One tech found 2 gun boxes in Butch's room and just grabbed them to bring them back to the station. One box was a Marlin 35, that's the gun that would have been in it. And at this time, the tech didn't know what the murder weapon was, but this proved to spark the detectives to look into Butch's story further. Investigators questioned Bobby, who told them about the fake robbery that Butch had set up earlier. They quickly began to suspect that Butch was playing them and that he was the one they should be looking at. Around 9 a.m. the next morning, Butch was still at the police station being protected, and he had fallen asleep when a detective shook him awake. He asked if they had found Fellini yet, and the detective said, "No, we have not," but boom, arrested.
Boom, arrested. Bet you didn't see that coming, Butch.
No, he did not. He read him his rights, and Butch was like, no, you can't. I'm cooperating. And he waived his right to counsel, claiming to be an innocent witness with nothing to hide. So by this time, detectives that had been questioning Butch, they're exhausted. So 2 other detectives stepped in to question him, and they immediately zeroed in on his timeline. In his written statement, he said that he was up around 4 a.m. and had heard the bathroom before going to work early, implying that the murders would have had to happen after he left, right? But given that each family member was still in their night clothes and in bed, the detectives began to question his story and pick apart anything that they could. So eventually, they got Butch to relent on his claim that he thought the crime took place after he left that morning. The evidence and the bodies suggested that they were killed between 2 and 4 a.m. And by Butch's own admission, he was home during that time. They continued to pounce on any discrepancies they could find in Butch's written statement. They could physically link to being in the home at the time of the murders by his own words now, right? Butch tried to say that he had been in the house when the murders took place, but it was only afterwards that he was in each room. And the detectives were like, no. They pointed out the fact that his family was killed with a 35 caliber Marlin rifle, and that Butch had an empty box for a 35 caliber Marlin rifle in his room, and the rifle was nowhere to be found. So they basically laid it all out for him. They were like, look, there has to be more than what you're saying, and you're the one who owns the gun that killed your family.
Yeah, like, why would a mafia hitman come in, go into your secret little room, and steal your gun? I mean, I guess he could possibly do that to frame him if he did know about the thing, but like, I've seen mafia hitman movies. They go in, it's pop, and they're gone.
Oh.
They're not leaving shit all over the house. They're not going and getting found. They're not, like...
That's very true. Yes. Pop. Done.
Out of there.
Oh my gosh, what was, Pop. Oh, it was Community. Did you watch Community?
I did.
Wasn't that a thing that, like, Abed and, what was his name? I can't remember his name.
Troy
and Abed were, or no, the other guy in the class, the Spanish class, he'd be like, pop.
I don't remember.
It was like his tagline. Anyway, whatever. Butch's story changed time and time again, which, as we all know, if somebody's story changes all the time, they are telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, he claimed that he was woken up by Fellini putting a gun to his head with another man. Then they led him to room and killed his family right in front of him. And the detectives are like, keep it coming. Come on, keep talking. Eventually, Butch talked about picking up the cartridges from the crime scene, and they questioned why he did it, as he claimed, but you know, why he did it if he didn't know that his gun had been used, right? Why was he cleaning up the crime scene? But Butch was like, I'm still talking. Please don't interrupt me.
Yeah.
So finally, they're fed up with all of his stories changing. So they asked him straightforward, quote, "It didn't happen that way, did it?" Butch told them to give him a minute as he put his head in his hands. They pushed and asked if Fellini and the other man were even there. And Butch told them no. And he said it all started so fast and that once he started, he just couldn't stop. He told them that he took a shower and redressed after the murders, and he told them where he drove and discarded his bloodstained clothes, the murder weapon, and expelled cartridges before going into work that morning.
Uh-oh.
I think that's bad.
That's bad. I think that's bad. Yeah. I mean, and everything leading up to that, also bad.
Yeah. Got witnesses, I'm sure, hearing you say, "I'm going to kill you" to your dad like 19 times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then he goes, ends up dead.
Yeah.
And it was your gun. It's like all the things. And I don't even know why he even tried to to keep that going. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, they're like, hey, bud, like, sorry your family's all dead. And he's like, what? My family?
I tried to call them all day, even though their cars were there.
Yeah.
Did he try calling the cars, I wonder? Is that why the cars were like, look, I'm here, but I haven't seen Louise. I don't even know where she is.
I don't know where they are. Yeah. I don't know. But that's part 1, okay?
Yeah.
So the next part, we're going to go into his trial, all of those things, and then we're going to talk about the Lutz family and that
And the scaries.
And the scaries, yeah. So if you're a patron, you have part 2 ready and available to go. I don't know what I was doing there.
Where you were going. Yeah.
If you're not a patron, ain't no thing. You can just catch it next week. Either way, we love you.
Yes, we do. Bye.
Bye.